Now to discuss this is the Labour MP Stephen Kinnock, whose Aberavon constituency includes the Port Talbot plant, and the Conservative MP Chris Philp, who sits on the Treasury Select Committee. You live there part of the time, or much of the time,
yes.
And I'm wondering, did this all just suddenly come up and that was it, or have you had a sense that this needed looking at for some time?
No, this crisis has been brewing for a long time, and we've known for several weeks that the 29th of March meeting in Mumbai was going to be absolutely critical. I think that's what raises even bigger questions about the shambolic nature of the government's response. This is not something that's come out of the blue. But what's critical now is that the government rolls up its sleeves, gets to work with Tata Steel, makes a plan very clearly around how we're going to get Tata Steel to keep operating whilst we look for a buyer. And the future livelihoods of thousands of people in my constituency rest on this. And I can tell you the sense of anger and frustration is building.
Well, Chris Philp, this is the essence of how Parliament works and how politics work. That you have a committee and you're on it, and you start saying, hang on a minute, Scunthorpe's gone, Redcar's dead, we'd better look at Port Talbot. Have you been looking at Port Talbot? And if so, what is your solution? What's going to happen?
Well, I think, first of all, in terms of what the government has done so far, they've
No, I'm talking about your committee. We'll come to the government in a moment. Your committee, your MPs, we've elected you to look after business and particularly to look at steel. What's your plan?
Well, it falls under the Biz Committee, not Treasury, but I think the point is, as Stephen said rightly a moment ago, we need to see the government stepping in and working with whether it's the existing management or a potential buyer to provide whatever assistance and guarantees are needed to keep that plant operating in a really difficult global environment. It is very tough. Steel prices have collapsed. There's huge overcapacity, but that won't last forever, and I think the government should work with a buyer or management to keep the plant operating until market conditions improve.
Well, where would the Treasury Committee reckon the money could come from in order to do that?
Well, I think
our pockets.
You've got to view it in the round and think about the jobs that will be saved. And by the way, if we do lose the UK's steel manufacturing capability, and the Chinese end up with an effective global monopoly, in 3 or 4 years' time, they may end up putting up their steel prices, and then we will be in big trouble. So I think there are compelling strategic, as well as human, the job losses and economic reasons for trying to keep this plant open.
Now, the Prime Minister says he's been working behind the scenes. Presumably you've seen the shadow of his hand moving about in Aberavon.
Blink and you miss it.
What's the story?
Well, I think there's been lots of talk and very little action. For 5 years we've had talk about dealing with Chinese dumping. In fact, they've been working against the European Commission's attempts to give dumping regulations more teeth.
Well, but raising tariffs against the Chinese comes with awful penalties. I mean, George Bush did it in America back in 2003, and that ended in serious tears. He had to back down, but the Chinese threatened every possible thing in the book. We couldn't afford it.
It's difficult to imagine a higher penalty than losing 40,000 jobs, though, John. I mean, we're talking now about a strategic steel industry that is hanging by a thread. And when you look at the entire supply chain, you're talking about 40,000 jobs. What's extraordinary to think of is that this announcement, which I think is one of the biggest business and economy-related things in post-war Britain,
I want to know what you think.
Javid wasn't even in the country.
Well, that's what I want to know. I mean, is there any sign that he's ever been down there?
Well, I understand...
You're the MP, you'd know.
Yes, yeah, I know that he has been in Port Talbot at least once. He may have been there more times and not told me about it.
But do you sense it is absolutely pivotal within his department? This is the big thing.
It should be, but I don't get a sense of the urgency. What I found extraordinary is that the Prime Minister has come out with such mixed messages. Well, he says, we don't want nationalisation, but all options are on the table. What does that even mean?
Okay, can I start by just talking about what the government has done so far? So in the face of this global steel crisis, the government has put £400 million into subsidising their electricity prices, which have been high. That's a 30% electricity price subsidy. They've campaigned vigorously at the European level to introduce tariffs. We've got a 9 to 13% tariff on rebar, and the British government is pushing for a higher tariff, a 30% tariff. So there's been real action at the European level. In fact, George Osborne this evening is in Paris talking to his European colleagues about going further on this tariff to protect us against cheap Chinese imports.
I just heard a sort of gasp, but it's all very well, but Labour's been in Europe for a very long time. What have they done?
Well, if you look back at, say, 2011, the share of Chinese steel in the British market was minimal, 3–4%. It's now up at around 50–60%. So this is a crisis that's really come to a head in the last 4 or 5 years.
Stephen Kinnock, but there's no real sign of Labour really going for gold. We had Jeremy Corbyn on last night. I mean, he really had nothing to say in terms of what they were going to do to the government over this. There was no call for anybody's resignation. This is a problem which has been sitting there, smouldering away, and nobody's done anything about it, and bang, suddenly, PwC are in there tonight, and they may well take measures which will result in this business going straight into administration.
It's impossible to overstate the importance. We have called for untold debates in the chamber. We've had a Save Our Steel campaign. I went out to Mumbai with the delegation from the brilliant community union that lead on this. So I feel that we have been trying to hold the government to the fire.
They say they've done everything they can do.
They've been asleep at the wheel.
Well, look, it's a bit Richard Labour talking about this. 40,000 steel jobs were lost under Labour. That's more than are currently employed in UK steel in total. But the government has taken action. I've mentioned the tariffs. I've mentioned the 400 million. We need to, and the fact that George Osborne this evening is on the case. But we do need to make sure that the money is available.
George Osborne's a bit well disposed towards the Chinese, isn't he?
Well, I mean, we are lobbying. The UK government is lobbying. I've got a letter in my pocket from the Business Minister, Anna Soubry, confirming to me in writing that we are lobbying in Europe for a 30% tariff on rebar, up from 10%. So I've got written evidence that we're pushing the Europeans to go even further.
Chris Philp, Stephen Kinnock, thank you both very warmly for coming in. Matt.